The cards hit the studio floor with a sound that silenced 200 people. Steve Harvey had just done something no game show host had ever done. He stopped the game, walked away from the podium, and knelt down in front of a 9-year-old girl who was crying. In that instant, Family Feud stopped being a show. It became something else entirely. A moment that stripped away all the lights, the laughter, and the performance until only truth and humanity remained. But to understand what led to that moment, you have to go back to the beginning of that afternoon, before 3 words shattered an entire studio. It was a Tuesday in Atlanta, the kind of day that hummed with routine. Steve Harvey was in his element, standing beneath the familiar glow of the Family Feud lights, greeting 2 families who had come from opposite ends of the country. The Gonzalez family from Phoenix was facing off against the Richardson family from Memphis. The crowd was alive with anticipation, the theme music booming, the laughter effortless, the smiles genuine. Steve's charm, that unshakable mix of humor and heart, filled the air like music. To everyone watching, it was just another day of games and good television. But in the far corner of the stage, something extraordinary was quietly waiting to unfold. At the end of the Gonzalez podium stood a little girl in a bright yellow dress. Her name was Emma Gonzalez, and though she wasn't old enough to play, her teenage sister Maria had begged the producers to let her join the family on stage. Emma had been excited for weeks. Her grandmother had picked out that yellow dress herself, telling her it was a lucky color. She wore it proudly, her hair neatly tied back, her small hands gripping the edge of the podium as if she were holding on to something far bigger than a game show. Steve noticed her the moment she walked on stage. He always had a soft spot for quiet kids, the ones who didn't compete for attention but carried a kind of stillness that demanded it anyway. During introductions, he crouched down so he was eye level with her. "And who do we have here?" he asked, his tone gentle but full of warmth. "I'm Emma," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough for the microphone to catch it. "Well, hey there, Miss Emma," Steve said with a smile. "How old are you, sweetheart?" "9, she said, 9 years old. "Wow. And what do you want to be when you grow up?" There was a pause, a long, thoughtful pause that made Steve tilt his head slightly. Emma looked right into his eyes and said, "I want to help sick kids." The audience melted into a collective awe, and Steve chuckled, placing a hand over his heart. "Well, I think you're going to do just that." But something about the way she said it, so calm, so certain, stayed with him longer than he expected. The show rolled on, light and lively as ever. The Gonzalez family took an early lead, answering questions with confidence and laughter. Steve kept the jokes coming, feeding off the audience's energy. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until the 3rd round. The question was simple. Name something you might do to cheer up someone who's sad. Maria, quick as ever, hit the buzzer first. "Give them a hug," she said, and the board lit up number 1 answer. The family cheered, the crowd erupted, and Steve grinned as he moved to the next player. But then something caught his eye. At the edge of the Gonzalez podium, Emma wasn't cheering. Her family was jumping and clapping around her, but she stood perfectly still, her small shoulders shaking. Tears were rolling silently down her cheeks. Steve paused mid-sentence. Years of instinct told him how to read a room, but this was different. This wasn't a case of nerves or a child overwhelmed by cameras. This was something else, something deeper. He walked slowly toward her, smiling gently to keep the mood calm. "Hey, Emma," he said softly. "You okay, sweetheart?" "This is a lot of excitement, huh?" She looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "Steve," she whispered so quietly the microphones barely caught it. "Can I tell you something?" Steve hesitated. His producer's voice crackled faintly in his earpiece, reminding him to keep the show moving, to hit the next cue. But something in that tiny voice made everything else fade. He nodded slowly. "Of course you can," he said. Emma took a shaky breath. "I'm dying, Steve." The words hung in the air like smoke, soft, surreal, and impossible to grasp. The laughter stopped. The applause froze. 200 people went utterly still. Steve's mouth fell open slightly, his cue card slipping from his hand and fluttering to the studio floor. "I have leukemia," she said, her voice small but steady now. "The doctor said I probably won't see my 10th birthday. My family doesn't know I know, but I heard them talking when they thought I was sleeping. You could hear the air conditioning hum in the silence that followed. The front row gasped. A few audience members put their hands over their mouths. And Steve Harvey, the man whose wit had carried him through decades of television, couldn't find a single word. He knelt down again, lowering himself to her level. "Emma," he said softly, "how long have you known?" "Since we got picked for the show," she said. "I didn't want to ruin it for my family. My sister Maria takes care of me all the time, and my mom and dad are always worried. I just wanted them to have one day where they could laugh." Steve's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his white pocket square, perfectly folded, and gently dabbed the tears from her cheeks. Then he stood, turned toward the control booth, and said words that no Family Feud host had ever said before. "Stop the music." The theme music faded. The lights dimmed slightly. The laughter, the cues, the schedule, gone. Steve turned back to Emma, his voice stripped of all the performance. "Sweetheart," he said, "you're not ruining anything. You're reminding us what this is all about." He looked toward the other family. "Richardsons," he said, "I'm going to ask y'all something, and I want the truth. Would you mind if we stopped the game for a while?" The Richardson patriarch, a tall man with silver hair, shook his head immediately. "Steve," he said, his voice breaking, "you do whatever that little girl needs." Steve nodded, walked back to Emma, and did something no host had ever done on national television. He took off his suit jacket, the same perfectly tailored jacket he wore for every taping, and draped it over her small shoulders. It looked enormous on her, swallowing her frame, but it felt right. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling now, "I want you to keep this, and I want you to know something. You are not dying, sweetheart. You are living. You've lived more in these 9 years than most folks live in 90. Emma blinked, surprised. "How do you know?" she asked softly. Steve smiled faintly. "Because someone who worries about her family's happiness instead of her own, someone who's brave enough to tell the truth on national TV, that's someone who understands love. And love," he said, looking around the silent studio, "never dies." The audience erupted, not in laughter this time, but in tears and applause. The Richardson family crossed the stage, surrounding the Gonzalez family in hugs. Even the camera crew was crying. Steve stood tall again, turning to the crowd. "You know what?" he said, voice strong and clear. "We're not stopping the show. We're restarting it. But this time, both families play together, for Emma. Every point we earn today goes to help her fight this thing. That's what family does." What followed was unlike anything ever seen on television. The two families played side by side, cheering each other on, clapping for every right answer. Steve tossed the rulebook aside and started making up questions designed to make Emma smile. "Name something that makes you brave," he shouted. Emma giggled and said, "Telling the truth." The crowd roared. "Name something that never runs out," Steve asked next. "Love," Emma said without hesitation. The studio filled with applause so loud it shook the rafters. At the end of the taping, Steve knelt down beside her one last time. He leaned in close and whispered something in her ear. The microphones didn't catch it, but whatever he said made Emma smile, a real radiant smile that filled the room with light. Later, the producers revealed what Steve had told her. He'd given her his personal phone number and told her she could call him any time, day or night, if she ever felt scared or just needed someone, to remind her how brave she was. The episode aired 3 months later and broke every record in Family Feud history. More than 10 million people watched the clip of Steve kneeling before a little girl in yellow, his jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Donations poured in from around the world. Over $2 million for children's cancer research. Emma's story touched millions, but it changed Steve Harvey most of all. Emma fought her leukemia for 2 more years. She turned 10, then 11, then 12. On her 12th birthday, a package arrived from Atlanta. Inside was a perfectly tailored suit jacket, Steve Harvey's signature style, only smaller. A note was tucked into the pocket. "From one brave person to another," it said. "Keep fighting. Keep loving. Keep living. Uncle Steve." Today, Emma Gonzalez is 15 and cancer-free. She still has Steve's original jacket, framed on her bedroom wall. Every year on the anniversary of that episode, Steve gets a text from her. "Still living, still loving. Thank you for reminding me what brave looks like." That day changed the way Steve approached everything. Every show, every contestant, every moment on camera. My job isn't to run a game show, he later said. My job is to create moments where people can be their best selves. Emma showed me what that looks like. The jacket Steve gave Emma has become a quiet legend at the Family Feud studio. New staff are told her story as part of their orientation, not for ratings or fame, but as a reminder of what the show can truly mean. Somewhere deep in the archives, the producers still keep every frame of that raw, unedited footage. They say it's not about perfect television. It's about capturing something almost no one ever sees anymore, a moment of pure, unfiltered humanity. And every time Steve walks onto that stage now, he still carries a spare pocket square in his jacket. Just in case another Emma comes along, another soul carrying a secret too heavy for small shoulders. Someone who needs to be reminded that they're not alone. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fanfare or rules or prizes. Sometimes it's a man in a suit jacket kneeling down to listen. Sometimes it's a child in yellow teaching the world what courage looks like. And sometimes it's a moment so real it breaks the barrier between television and truth, between game and grace, between fear and love. That day, Family Feud didn't crown a winning team. It crowned a winning heart. And it reminded millions watching that even in a world built on laughter and lights, there is still room for silence, for tears, and for the kind of bravery that changes people forever. Because that's what love looks like. That's what courage sounds like. And that's what happens when a 9-year-old girl teaches an entire world how to live.